All right, and they called him Simon Zealots because he was a zealot. I'll also read you this in Acts 1 and 13. The scripture says this. Acts 1 and 12. Then returned they unto talking about the disciples and the apostles. Then returned they unto Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is from Jerusalem a Sabbath day's journey. And when they would come in, they went up into an upper room where abode Peter. A Sabbath day's journey, I believe, is 1.5 miles. If I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong, but you can look it up and correct it. And when they would come in, it might be 1/2 mile. It's either 1/2 mile or 1.5 miles. I think a Sabbath day's journey is 1/2 mile. It says this. And when they would come in, they went up into an upper room where abode both Peter, James, and John, Andrew, Philip, and Thomas Bartholomew, Matthew, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Simon Zealots, and Judas, the brother of James. All right, so one of those men came out of the sect of the Zealots. Now I'm going to show you here where Paul was actually a former Pharisee. This is Acts 15 and 5, where Paul is speaking. It says this. I'm going to start at verse 4, 15 and 4. And when they were come to Jerusalem, they were received of the church and of the apostles and the elders, talking about Paul and Barnabas, and they declared all things that the Most High had done unto them, or done with them. But there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed, saying, this was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. All right, that's not the scripture I wanted, but that shows you that some of the Pharisees started to believe, but they were still on that, keep the law, Old Testament deal. What I was looking for was Acts 23. Yes, Salakia, Acts 23, and there's a couple more scriptures I'm gonna hit. Now this is the scripture right here, 23 and 6. But when Paul perceived that the one part was Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Of the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am called in question. All right, so Paul was actually a Pharisee, and when he used it to his advantage when he was around other Pharisees, and when he had so said, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. It says this is a good point also. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, neither angel nor spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. All right. This is another statement Paul made in Acts 26 and 5. It says this. Acts 26 and 1. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, thou art permitted to speak for thyself. Then Paul stretched forth the hand and answered for himself, I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews. Now this is about the time, this is around 59 AD when this happened. King Agrippa, he was basically the second under the Caesar in the Roman Empire. All right, a white guy. It says this, especially because I know thee to be expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews, wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently. My manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among my own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews. All right, Paul grew up in Jerusalem, which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion, I lived as a Pharisee. All right, so the Apostle Paul felt like the sect of the Pharisees was the straightest and the best group to be into because they kept that letter of the law. All right, whether they did it out of the sincerity of their hearts or not, they still was pushing and teaching the right things. All right. That's why the scripture said, "As deceivers yet true, by honor and by dishonor." All right. That's why Paul said they was the straightest sect. Because let me read you this. If you was with the Pharisees, you knew the scriptures and you knew that law. All right. Whether you was doing it out of the sincerity of your heart, that fell upon your head. This is Philippians 3 and 5. This is Paul speaking about himself. "Circumcised the 8th day, of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law, a Pharisee." All right, he says touching the law, a Pharisee. So he was saying, I'm a Pharisee, so you know I know the law. All right. Now Paul also said he was from the tribe of Benjamin or whatever. Paul would be considered today a Jamaican or West Indian. All right. So you had righteous men and apostles that was members of those groups. But I just want to read a little more on these groups here. This is out of the I'm gonna come out of this encyclopedia real quick, then I'm gonna jump back into Josephus. All right, this is on the Pharisees out your basic encyclopedia. Pharisees, so-called Jewish sect, more correctly a Jewish school, probably dating as a distinct body or party from the 2nd century BC. Their chief tendency was to resist all Greek or other foreign influences that threatened to undermine the sacred religion of their fathers, and they took their stand most emphatically upon divine law. They originated as the Hasidim, becoming known as the Pharisees when John Hyrcanus was high priest of Judea. All right, John Hyrcanus was also the governor of Judea at that time. He was the high priest, and he was also said to be a prophet. The Sadducees, or Zadokites, derived from them in political to some extent. It goes on to say this, extent religious matters. The Pharisees wish the state and all public and political affairs to be directed and measured by the standard of divine law without regard for the priestly and aristocratic Sadducees or the heroes and statesmen who had brought the Syrian wars to a successful issue. Their doctrine was of an ethical, spiritual, sometimes mystical Judaism. That's basically just to describe our religion, or our worship of the Most High. When they say Judaism, that's what that means. Which enabled the religion to survive the destruction, which is in 70 AD, of the temple, and which later became the dominant form of Judaism. Yahweh Shai, in his condemnation of the Pharisees, recorded in the New Testament, is in fact referring to the hypocritical Pharisees also condemned in the Talmud. Among the 5 classes is Show the Pharisee with his good deeds on his shoulder, but the Talmud also mentioned the God-fearing Pharisee like the Hebrew patriarch Job. I don't know where they got that from. All right. And the God-loving Pharisee, these last even in the Gospels as sympathetic to Yahweh Shai, if not to his ideas. Because you have Pharisees that believed on Yahweh Shai. Alright, Yahweh Shai sat and ate with him from time to time. Alright, it says this about the Sadducees in this encyclopedia. Sadducees, Jewish school or party that arose in the 1st century BC, taking its name from Zadok in the Old Testament, a priest during the reigns of King David and Solomon, or from Zadokites, a family of priests. The Sadducees, an aristocratic party, acknowledged only the written Torah as binding, rejecting the scribes' traditional interpretation and development of the law. All right, because the scribe, they would at first they would just copy and write the scriptures and make books, but then they started putting their own spin on it, so to speak, and writing whatever. It goes on to say this about the Sadducees. Their criminal jurisprudence was so rigorous that the day on which their code was abolished by the Sanhedrin was declared a festival. Now I don't know when that happened or whatever. But basically all these groups was committing criminal jurisprudence or whatever the word is.